The Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
There is no chance you didn't say to yourself with 3.6 seconds to go, here we go again, right? How many times did we see it this year for Maryland? I was at the one where, oh, God, the air went out of the balloon like you wouldn't believe. The Michigan State game, beaten on a 65-footer at the buzzer, beaten on a layup in the Big Ten tournament. Come on. But this time, Maryland had the ball for the last shot. And this time the shot went down. And this time the Terrapins are going to the Sweet 16 for the first time in 9 years. Oh, how sweet it is. Oh, how sweet it is. Oh, boy. We're going to have lots and lots of what we call audio from the locker room, from, well, they don't even do interviews in the locker room anymore. It's the media room. Also from the court, Andy Katz talking to Kevin Willard with the backdrop of what went on last week. I mean, this not only was this a big shot by Derik Queen, this was a shot that silenced the chattering crowd, because if that doesn't go down, what we're talking about today is, oh, God, what a distraction Kevin Willard created for his team. Openly talking about his contract, chasing the athletic director away, should have been concentrating on getting his team ready to play in the NCAA tournament. And look at this. That would have been the conversation. Instead, we're all talking about this.
The Terps are down by 1. And Gillespie looks to inbound. There it goes to Queen. Queen will drive in against Morton. Queen with a shot off the glass. Got it! And the Terps have won it at the buzzer on a shot. Oh, my goodness. By Derik Queen. 72-71. And you're heading to San Francisco. It's about time. Wow. How about that? Man, oh, man, oh, man.
That is Johnny Holiday and Chris Nocky in Seattle last night as Derik Queen knocked the shot down, a running. And we'll get to the controversy over whether or not he traveled. If you've been watching basketball for the last 25, 30 years, you know that was not a travel, but there's some chirping going on. Oh, he traveled. No, he didn't travel. And the shot counted, and Maryland survives and advances. And for whatever you want to say about, a game where they easily could have lost to Colorado State, this is the NCAA tournament. What happens in one game has no bearing on the other. And could they go to San Francisco on Thursday and beat top seed Florida, who I believe Jay Billis said was the best team in the tournament? Yeah, they can. They can, because at this point, everybody is tournament tested. You've got a veteran player who's been terrific for them. I mean, I don't think you can underestimate what Julian Reese has done this year, going from a liability on the court, especially in crunch time where he couldn't hit free throws, to now being money. He was 5 for 5 from the free throw line last night, 5 of 7 from the field. He also had 15 rebounds. Yes, Queen goes down as the hero for knocking down the shot. But, you talk about a one-year improvement for a guy who had been in Maryland for 3 years. It's amazing. I mean, he's not just a solid free throw shooter now. He's a dependable free throw shooter. And he knocked them down, which enabled them to set up this last shot and win the game by 1 point. If you look at the history of Maryland basketball in the tournament, there was that incredible 2-year run where they got to back-to-back Final Fours. But I think if you look the last 50-plus years, there's more heartbreak than joy. The national championship in 2002, that erases most of it. But the year before, up 22 points against Duke, they lose that game. Other years, like, for example, 1999, they had arguably the best player in the country in Steve Francis. Gary Williams thought he had a Final Four team that year. They happened to play their worst game of the year against Ron Artest and St. John's and went out in the second round. That's kind of the randomness of this. It's only one game, and you can have your best game, you can have your worst game, but it counts the most at this time, and it's not over till it's over. And it was 22 years and 2 days ago that this happened.
Nicholas, the senior, with 2 seconds. Here he goes for the win. No, the Terps done it. Maryland I said the impersonator of Juan Dixon. That might have been one up on Dixon.
That is Jim Nance and the late Billy Packer with the Drew Nicholas shot to beat UNCW in 2003. Remember, Maryland is defending champs. They had been to the 2 previous Final Fours, and they're about to go out to UNCW, and Drew Nicholas rescues them. Now, they play in the second round. Michigan State, who's been their nemesis, really, especially since they've left the ACC, although those days they were in the ACC, and had a chance to beat them. But Steve Blake, who'd had a really bad game, had a chance to either tie it or win it at the end with a three-pointer that was missed, and Maryland went home. But, you think about what's happened in the NCAA tournament. Those are 2 where it went Maryland's way at the end. Maybe the Nicholas one even more unbelievable than what happened last night. Celebration, obviously, on the court. Andy Katz doing the sideline work for was CBS last night? Was it, or this was maybe a TBS game or TNT? It's hard to keep track, but this is Andy Katz on the court moments after the shot went down.
Well, Kevin, I covered a couple of those buzzer beaters. Northwestern, Michigan State. What did you just tell me? Maybe without, one of the words.
I think we were finally due for us to have one. I think our last 4 losses have all been buzzer beaters. When Lake shot that shot, I was like, man, that's going in. And I'm like, but we were due to get one. So proud of my team. Colorado State.
You called timeout. You got the best player on the floor, the freshman, who you've said from day one is one of the best players in the country. What did you call?
You know what? I asked everybody. I said, who wants the ball? And he said, give me the MF ball. And I said, all right, you're getting it. And I said, don't mess around. Go after it and do it. And I give him a lot of credit, man. The big dog came up and threw.
All right, let's bring in that big dog from Maryland. A well-deserved hug. Derik, you made a decision to stay home, and you just delivered your state school to the Sweet 16. How often did you script what we just witnessed?
I mean, I couldn't do it without my team. Like, we was down, and then Jude, Jordan, Selton, all the seniors, so we didn't want them to want this to be that last game, so we just kept fighting, and coaches and my teammates trusted me to take that last shot.
There was a timeout. You said, I'm not going to say the full thing, but you said, get me the ball when you came out of the timeout. Where does that confidence come from?
I mean, so I think I'm from Baltimore, that's why. And then I kind of had it going all game. Me and my teammates had it going, and like I said, like they trusted me to take that last shot.
Congratulations, you're off to San Francisco in the Sweet 16.
Yes, sir, thank you.
That is a Baltimore star, and he wasn't even born when this was going on. But there was a period of time where Maryland was not getting Baltimore players. The word was out on the streets in Baltimore, among them, different guys that, no, Maryland doesn't treat you right if you're from Baltimore. And they had a hell of a time getting players out of there. And for all the criticism that Gary Williams took for his recruiting, he was a hell of a coach. And he could beat you with his or he could beat you with yours, as the old saying goes. But he took heat for not getting the big studs, that he didn't land them. And he wasn't the kind of guy who was a, schmoozer and someone who would, have big home visits and land. He got his guys. He got great players. He had a great program for a long, long time at Maryland. But the ice broke. And it broke in 1994. 1993. Keith Booth was a big star in Baltimore, and everybody wanted Keith Booth. And Rick Pitino brought him to Kentucky for Midnight Madness. He was going to land Keith Booth, and Gary got him. And the dam broke. Keith Booth had a great career at Maryland, played a couple of years with the Bulls. I think he won a championship there. But that was a huge deal. And so when he says, we want to show people from Baltimore that you can go to Maryland, I give him some credit for that. But he doesn't really understand the history of this. Ernie Graham was a great player at Maryland. He had a 44-point game, and he was from Baltimore. But for whatever reason, maybe he felt like his NBA career, if he had one, should have happened. They should have prepared him better, whatever it was. But he put the word out that Maryland was not the place to go, and it took, probably took 10, 11 years for Gary to break the ice there and bring in Keith Booth. So that's a huge thing, and showing the way for Baltimore guys that they can play close to home and have a great year. And he's going to be a lottery pick. He will have, they hope, 4 more games in Maryland. Maybe it's 1, maybe it's 2, whatever it is. But we know he's got at least 1 more, and that's coming up on Thursday night in San Francisco. Now, on the kvetching about the traveling. Okay, maybe what you learned at the YMCA when you were growing up, that's a travel. In 2025, that's not a travel. And I credit Nico Medvedev, who is the coach at Colorado State, for handling the question about it in the right way. This was part of the Colorado State news conference last night after the loss.
I think there was a time and a day when that would have been a travel at the end of the game. I wonder how you feel about that.
I haven't seen the video yet. It's going to be hard for me to watch. I'm sure I will at some point. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. But it doesn't matter. They didn't call one. So, whether it was or wasn't, they didn't call one, and they never go back and change the call. But, again, he made a really difficult shot, guys. I mean, he made a really, really difficult shot, and they just made one more play than we did.
Yeah, good for Nico Medved. That was a classy answer. Gene Steratore had the big breakdown on the postgame show last night. I didn't stay up to see it, but I saw a tweet from Seth Davis, and Steratore said, no, that's not a travel. Sometimes they'll even say, like, oh, yeah, that's probably a travel, but you can't call it in that situation. Nah. In 2025, that's not a travel, and that's a basket. That's a win for Maryland. And they move on to Thursday night in San Francisco to play number 1 Florida. And as Kevin Willard said in the post-game news conference, it was simply our time.
These guys have bounced back every time we've had a buzzer beater. And really the gut punch was Michigan State. These guys have shown such character in how they've bounced back. And that's all I told them in the huddle. I said, guys, for the first time, we have time left. I'm like, it's our time to kind of make our moment happen. We haven't had that chance. And so I was really they just bounced back. They're a great group. They do listen. And, I'm just happy for them. I mean, this is a moment that they'll remember for the rest of their lives. I'm still going to be coaching for hopefully 10 or 12 more years. But for these guys, Ju's a senior, DQ's going to the pros. Rod's going to be around with me for a while. But it's a great experience for him.
Yeah, and look, he's right. That game against Michigan State, it's the kind of game that can take the wind out of your sails. I mean, you can go into a funk after something like that. Now, to be fair, if the 65-footer doesn't goes to overtime, and maybe Michigan State wins anyway. But to lose the game like they did, they hit a bucket to tie it, and then to give up a 65-footer at the buzzer can be devastating, but they won the next 2. They won at Penn State. They won at Michigan, got the season back on track, and unfortunately for them, they lost yet another one in the Big Ten tournament, but everything starts anew. And the way they came out against Grand Canyon, where they blew their doors off in the opening game, I think, said a lot. Grand Canyon had 49 points, Maryland winning 81-49 or 84-49. I mean, that was that put to bed any of those distraction things or the hangover from the Big Ten tournament or anything like that. And give them a lot of credit for what they did. Now, as for what's left, and if you look at the field, Cinderella's, I don't know if we'll ever have one again. I don't know if there'll ever be a George Mason. I don't know if there'll be a VCU. The mid-majors, they're good enough to get their teams in to win a conference, maybe win a game along the way. But by the time you get to this point, you're looking at big programs. They're all 4 number 1s are left among the Sweet 16. 3 of the 2s, St. John's going out, and we'll get to that coming up. 2 of the 3s, 3 of the 4s, 1 5, 2 6s, and the highest seed left, or lowest seed, depending on how you look at it, Arkansas. They're a 10 seed. But Arkansas is from the SEC. They had 14 teams in. And John Calipari is the coach. And he's loaded with money from, I believe, Purdue Chicken. So those days are gone. And what's happened is the best player from a mid-major leaves at the end of every season because there's more money out there. And it was great fun. It's now been 19 years since George Mason went through. Oh, my God. And they beat the Blue Bloods along the way. I mean, they beat North Carolina, Michigan State. And to get to the Final Four, they beat UConn with pros. But I don't know if that can happen again. If the Cinderella is a 10-seed Arkansas, that tells you something. The rest of them are all big schools. Auburn, number 1 seed. Duke, the bluest of the Blue Bloods. Houston, they've always been a factor in recent years with Kelvin Sampson. Kentucky still alive. Tennessee was there all season. Florida. I mean, these are all big schools. And the tournament's fun, and it's fun to watch what happened with Maryland last night. But what made March as mad as it has been doesn't really exist anymore. The Ali Farouk Maneshes of the world don't exist. The Barry Goheens, the people who become these heroes for a short period of time, their one shining moment, that's pretty much gone. It's chalky. Is it worse? I don't know. I can't say it's worse. The basketball's entertaining. I love March Madness. I love to watch the games. I pretty much watched nonstop all Saturday and all of yesterday. But you look across the board, it's very chalky, and it's chalky with big schools. And if your Cinderella is coached by John Calipari, that kind of indicates where the game is right now. Coming up, Rick Pitino on a very, very curious decision in their loss to Arkansas. We'll get to that. Danny Hurley, did he really go out with class? We'll talk about that and much more. Also in the next hour, we'll take a further look at the power play that Kevin Willard seems to have successfully pulled off. Does it mean he stays in Maryland? Even with the team in the Sweet 16, I don't know if we can count on it. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Poland Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, so buzzer beaters have been few and far between in this tournament. I mean, really few and far between, because it opened with a buzzer beater with Alabama State beating St. Francis in the first of the play-in games last Thursday night. And I guess the last one would be the buzzer beater for Maryland last night as they wound up getting past Colorado State on a Derik Queen shot. The initials DQ are really big this year. Dan Quinn, Derik Queen, right? Two different sports. One's professional, one's, well, it's professional. And we'll get to that coming up. But, among the head scratchers from the weekend was the game yesterday between St. John's and Arkansas, or actually Saturday game, with Arkansas winning the game 75-66. I mean, a lot of build-up, Pitino, Calipari. And if you go back, it's been, almost 40 years, but Pitino was the first one to really embrace the three. It came in 1986. Remember the Georgetown-Villanova game of 85. Villanova pretty much played a perfect game, shooting 78%. No threes. They didn't have the three in those days and no shot clock. And then finally they began to move towards the modern game of basketball as the three-pointer came in. And at the beginning, it was much shorter than it is now. It might have been a foot and a half or maybe even 2 feet closer. It's moved out over the years, but Pitino looked at this, and the analytics was not a big word in sports in those days, but he goes, well, they give you 3 for that one, and another 2 feet in, it's only 2. Let's take threes. And he had guys like Billy Donovan and Carlton Screen, and they were jacking up threes, and they made it to the Final Four. That's Providence. Providence was not supposed to be a Final Four team, but Pitino was that good of a coach and took advantage of a rule that he knew he could exploit to his advantage, and he had a great team that will go down in history in that part of the country. So over the years, he's used it quite a bit. Stops at Kentucky. He coached the Knicks. He coached the Celtics. He's been all over, and now he's at St. John's. And kind of, I guess ironically, they were god-awful from three in this game. Unbelievably, St. John's shot 2 for 22 from three. Arkansas really wasn't any better, 2 for 19. These two coaches, these two Hall of Fame coaches, Calipari and Pitino, their teams combined 4 for 41 from three. But the curious thing about this, if you're watching this game or if you followed up on this, the stories and the video about it, Pitino kept not only his best player, but the best player in the Big East this year, R.J. Luis, on the bench for the final 5 minutes of the game. He's their top scorer, averaged 18.2 points a game. Okay, he's having a bad game. But what do they say about shooters? Tell him to keep shooting. He's got a winnable game with 5 minutes to go, and the best player in the conference is on the bench. Now, 40 years ago, it would be unthinkable for Louis Carnesecca to keep Chris Mullin on the bench for the last 5 minutes of the game. And I'm not saying R.J. Luis is the player that Mullin was, but best player on the team, best player on the conference, not on the court in the final 5 minutes. Post-game news conference with Pitino.
You had R.J. on the bench, for a pretty long stretch at the end. Was that just because he just wasn't making them, or was there something more to it?
Played 30 minutes. It's a long time.
So he was tired?
No, played 30 minutes, and I went with other people. You already know the answers, Roger. You're asking leading questions. You already know it. So don't ask leading questions. You already know why he didn't play.
Yeah, well, he was missing shots, but I think more importantly, he wasn't distributing the ball. And Pitino did say that his team did not move the ball like they had all year. He's 72 years old. He's won national championships. One of them vacated, of course, at Louisville. He's coached in the pros. He's still at it, and he's still got the fire. Obviously, when there's an answer like that, a little bit later on in the news conference, there's a follow-up.
With RJ, Rick, he said he felt like he wasn't a good leader today. What did you think of in terms of that?
I'm just very appreciative for Aaron Scott. He had a bad game, but he gave me his heart and soul with a broken finger. I'm very appreciative of Kadari Richmond. He was a true pleasure to coach. He had a bad game tonight defensively, and it took him out of the game, but he was pure joy to coach. I'm very, very appreciative of Davon Smith, who's been hurt and gave me everything he had. So I'm very appreciative. I'm very thankful to the guys that gave me every single thing they had. I hate to see them go out this way. We thought we were championship driven in our minds, but I've been disappointed before with this. You hate to see us play like that. I don't mind going out with a loss. I just hate to see us play that way offensively. And we got to live with it. You put a lot of time and effort. The coaches did. And it's just a bitter pill to swallow with that type of performance. But we'll give the credit to Arkansas, and I'll be very, very thankful to those three guys for giving me everything they had. And we move on.
Was there one play with RJ that made you sit him in the last 5 minutes?
You know he was 3 for 17. You know he was 0 for 3. So you're answering your own. I'm not going to knock one of my players.
Well, there we go. So that's about all you're going to get out of Rick Pitino. But if R.J. Luis was better known, and that's also addressing what college basketball is these days, we saw Chris Mullin for 4 years at St. John's. We saw Patrick Ewing for 4 years at Georgetown. That's what helped to make the Big East. We were familiar with these guys on television. R.J. Luis, unless you've been following St. John's closely all year long, you don't know who he is, even though he's the best player in the conference. And it's a big deal in New York, and some are defending Pitino for what he did. But from the outside, looking in, this seems insane. And if it were another coach, you might say, oh, my God, this is what he did, a little temper tantrum, keeping his best player off the court because of what he didn't like or something like that. I mean, this is, if that's what they say about shooters. Sometimes the shooter will have a terrible, terrible game, but he'll get hot in the last 2 minutes. Well, we never got the opportunity with R.J. Luis. And because he's Pitino, kind of goes unquestioned. But that was really a stunner. It's the end of the run for Connecticut. And, boy, you think of the drama that has gone on in the last year. I mean, they blitzed their way through the tournament last year. They won every game in double digits. They won their opening game of the tournament. And now they're facing number 1 Florida yesterday, and they gave them a game. They gave them a really good game, but in the end, Florida was able to prevail 77-75. And, Danny Hurley, he was so much of the focus of the offseason. The Lakers wanted him. And how could he not take the Lakers job? He's won back-to-back. Nope, he's going to try and make history. He's going to try and become the first coach in 50 years, over 50 years, to win 3 straight. John Wooden won 7 straight at UCLA, and now is an opportunity in the modern game where players don't stay for 4 years for him to do it. And he comes up short. And this was the post game with Tracy Wolfson. After he turned down the Lakers, after he'd come back, he did the 60 Minutes interview. He told them, what the game is today, where he says, 50% of my players know they're going to transfer, know where they're going to go, and they know how much money they're going to get. So this is not something that went on at UCLA in the 1970s, but that's college basketball in 2025. So they go out by 2, and this was well done. I'll give him some credit for this. And he comes off as a very sympathetic and what's the word I'm looking for? I guess, somebody that you could really admire in this situation. And I guess this is admirable in a post-game news conference. It's not Roy Williams saying to Bonnie Bernstein, I don't give an S about North Carolina after his team lost in the finals. This was Hurley showing some emotion, and he comes off as somewhat of a sympathetic figure. So I want you to listen to this, but I also want you to understand what he did when he walked off the court after the loss. This was Hurley with Tracy Wolfson.
Coach, I could see the emotions on your face. I know this was a difficult one. You guys had them. You fought so hard, mucked it up. You said you made it a Big East game. Yeah. What happened down the stretch?
Yeah, they showed their quality. I thought we played with tremendous honor. I thought we played with the heart of a championship program and a program that's gone back to back. And for a team to end, what we really wanted to do, they were going to have to put us down. And obviously a worthy opponent like that, there's honor in the way we went out.
You mentioned that tournament streak, what you guys have been able to do. What did you tell your team in there?
Just love them. Just love them. This year has been a real battle. We've battled, and we've had to battle, and at times, I don't think we liked each other a whole lot. But some of the things we had to go through together. But I don't think I'll ever love a team more than how hard they fought for what we were trying to accomplish and for the honor they played with today.
Empathetic is the word I was looking for. Empathetic. Okay, he's empathetic there for what happened. But realize this, they're walking off the court after the game, and they made a shot at the end to make it closer than it really was. They lost by 2. And as they're walking off, Baylor is going on the court to warm up for their next game against Duke. And Hurley is yelling, this is not a player. This is a coach. Hurley is yelling to Baylor, I hope the refs don't F you like they F'd us. That's a coach. That's a player that says that. In most programs, he gets collared around the neck and he goes into the office with the coach. Let me have a word with you. That's not a classy way to go out. People didn't see that. That was picked up, I guess, by a cell phone camera as he walked off. But you're responsible 24 hours a day on how you represent your program. And I guess people will excuse it, that he's a great coach and he's won back-to-back championships and he had another good team this year that got to the second round. But that's not classy. That's you want to, pat yourself on the back for the way you went out gallantly in the NCAA tournament, how your run ended. But, you got to show class all the time. That's not something that Dean Smith would have done. That's maybe Bobby Knight would have done it. I don't know. And the cameras weren't on Knight all the time. And I generally like Danny Hurley. I admire him for what he did. He still carries the burden of not living up to the name as a player. His brother was one of the great college players of all time, and his career at Seton Hall didn't go like he wanted it to, so he's driven to be a coach. But that's not a way to conduct yourself. And I don't know if the NCAA would even fine him for that. If it happens in the NBA, the coach is going to get fined. So, I think you got to look at him on balance. Yes, poor old Danny Hurley fought his guts out, got his team back to the NCAA tournament, desperately wanted to win a third straight title. It didn't happen for him. But you can't conduct yourself like a little child walking off the court and saying that the refs F them and watch out, Baylor, you might get F too. Not the way to go. All right, moving on from that. Steve Lapis was on the Dan Patrick Show on Friday. Steve Lapis, I think, did a really good job as an analyst in the tournament. I don't know whether he's got any games left. We're in the Sweet 16, but he's an underrated guy, has been a coach at a couple of different programs, and early on in his career was an assistant coach at Villanova when they won the national championship. Hard to believe we're coming up on the 40th anniversary. I think April 1st is the 40th anniversary, and I was there, Lexington, Kentucky, when Georgetown lost to Villanova in what was one of the greatest upsets in the history of college basketball. At least that's the way it's looked at. But Lapis and others have said this many times over the years. When you zoom out of it and realize that these two programs had battled for a long, long time, Georgetown and Villanova, and both of them were loaded with seniors, including Patrick Ewing for Georgetown and Gary McLean and Ed Pinckney. Those guys have been playing against each other for years. So as Lapis pointed out on the Dan Patrick Show on Friday, this upset, which goes down maybe right alongside what NC State did to Houston 2 years earlier, was not really as big an upset as it might seem.
We played them twice that year, lost by 4, lost by 6. The year before that, when I wasn't there, they beat Georgetown, Villanova. Eddie Pinckney, as a sophomore, had 22 points and 20 rebounds against Patrick Ewing in a game that was an epic. So we knew, we didn't feel it. Like getting ready for the game, I mean, we knew we had to play well. There's no question. That was an unbelievable team. And let's understand this. We shot 79%. We won by 2. So you know what I mean? That tells you how good they were. But I can't agree with you more. You know, when you play somebody twice a year, we had seen Patrick Ewing 9 times before that. They would have intimidated anybody else they played. And I'll be honest with you, we were happy we weren't playing St. John's. It was a worse matchup for us because we were a matchup zone team, and Chris Mullen was obviously one of the best shooters in the world. Georgetown wasn't a good shooting team. We liked that matchup better than St. John's.
You know, you start to look at the all-time greats in college basketball. I don't know if Christian Laettner is the last of the all-time greats because they're not staying 3 or 4 years. It's usually if you're really good. I mean, Cooper Flagg could be one of the great players of all time, but he's just going to be a footnote of a one-and-done at Duke, and maybe they win a national title.
There's no doubt. This is a new age. You know, we're not going to see the Bill Waltons and the Lou Alcindors and, even Christian Laettner, who was a good pro, but wasn't like, obviously, a Bill Walton or Lou Alcindor. Yeah, or even Patrick Ewing was one of the greatest college players there ever was. So, it's just a different age now. And even now, it's even gotten crazier with this NIL and transfer portal. Even schools themselves, forget about the general public, it's hard for schools themselves to honor guys that are only at their school for 1 year, and then they're gone.
I wondered about this. I brought it up with Dan Dockage, and I said, Indiana never reached out to Steve Alford to coach there because, Clyde Drexler was at Houston, Mullen was at St. John's, Patrick Ewing at Georgetown. You can't hire somebody unless you know you can fire them. And I was always curious why Steve Alford never got the opportunity to coach Indiana.
That's a great point because here's a guy who's won 700 games in his career. He's been a tremendous coach his whole life from a young age. He obviously was one of the greatest players in the history of the school, winning the championship in '87. And, yeah, it's just a surprising thing. Why? Now, I think probably part of it has to do with the fact that he did coach at Iowa. That may have, he got that job when he was younger, and maybe that hurt him a little bit that he coached another Big Ten school. But he's a tremendous coach and, would have been a great one at Indiana, no question.
Well, I don't know about no question. I respect the opinion of Lapis, but he would have come in with a tremendous burden. There have been legends, and as, Patrick talked about. Now, it's different with Patrick Ewing. This was his first head coaching job. He'd been a longtime assistant in the pros. Chris Mullen, I don't believe it coached at any level. He goes to St. John's. That didn't work out. And then Clyde Drexler. And from what I understand, he didn't really put in the time that you need to at Houston. But it's a different deal with Alford. I mean, Alford had been a coach for a long time. I just think the feeling was at Indiana, unless we got a guy who's going to be a slam dunk great coach, the burden of being Steve Alford coaching at Indiana, a state where he was Mr. Basketball and led Indiana to the championship in 1987, would have been too much. And I think it was probably the right thing not to go. Although, they have not been to the Sweet 16 since my son was in school there in 2009. So let's see if it's DeVries. The guy's been at was West Virginia for a year. He went from Drake to West Virginia to Indiana in 3 years. Players transfer, coaches transfer. They've always transferred, but now they're transferring even faster than they used to. The look back at Villanova 40 years ago. there's also one other factor in this tournament that is a big deal up the road, not here. But this is the third straight year that there hasn't been a single team from Philadelphia in the NCAA tournament. You talk about hotbed cities for college basketball. That's one of the biggest. New York is not college basketball except when St. John's is good. This city is a little bit different in that we have Georgetown and Maryland, and when they're good, and there have been times when they've been both good at the same time, like 2001 when they met in the Sweet 16. But most big cities, college basketball, Chicago, L.A., except when UCLA is really good. I mean, the big cities are not college basketball hotbeds, but the days of the Big Five and playing in the Palestra, and I've been to a game, I've done a game in the Palestra. SMU played there against Penn when I was doing games over 40 years ago. It is an unbelievable place. You feel the history of college basketball there, and Phil Martelli, who is Philadelphia through and through, took St. Joe's to the NCAA tournament as a number one seed about 25 years ago, and now is retired. His son is coaching. And this is Phil Martelli in an interview that he did fairly recently, like a week or so ago. Jason Dumas, who does television in Philadelphia, sat down with Martelli to talk about the current state of the game and maybe a reason that Philadelphia has not had teams in the NCAA tournament last 3 years.
So let's call it what it is. This is pay for play. And the big, powerful schools are just going to keep raising the bar. So then I'll say, what do we in Philadelphia need to do? And I think that we have to really make a commitment to make it transformational and not transactional. If we make it only in Philadelphia about transactions, and I'm just using a name, Maryland will just keep raising, Alabama will just keep raising, Mississippi State will keep raising it to the point that you can't sit at that table anymore. But if we in Philadelphia would go back to trust. So if I say to you, Jason, do you trust that I will help you get your degree? Do you trust that I'm going to help you become a better player? Do you trust that I'm going to help you pursue a basketball career? Everybody wants that. Do you trust that I'm going to surround you with players that have a like mind? Do you trust that we can pursue championships? Because all of these sacrifices are worth it for these moments in times when you're in champion. Do you trust that if I can get you $10, I'll get you $10? I'm not going to get you $9. So all those are yes. So now I'm going to flip it. And I have to trust you on this. Are you interested in this being transformational, or are you interested in it being transactional? If it's in transactional and you need to make $30,000, then you know what? Good luck. I hope you get every single penny. But I'm going to go over here to Garrett, and I'm going to get Garrett. And I'm going to get a team of 10 who have complete trust and complete belief, and they are interested in it being transformational, not transactional. Please, Philadelphia basketball, don't give up on that. And don't get caught on just this is a money chase. If it's a money chase, we, and I mean that collectively in Philadelphia, we're never going to catch up.
Well, with all due respect, Phil, and I think he's a great coach and has been a real great example of what college basketball should be all about. That's not the game anymore. It is transactional. And you have families that don't have money or not familiar with having money. And $50,000, $75,000 is a lot of money, and it's money now. And you don't know whether you're going to tear up your knee. You don't know how good you're going to be in college. And so the difference of bird in the hand, you have the money versus the long-term outlook that you're talking about there, that's just not realistic to 18-year-old kids. And on top of that, the parents who see the money there, the parents who did all the schlepping to the AAU and saw them through and struggled to buy them sneakers when they, those people want the cash. It's just the way it is. And while he's right, and if you're his age or my age or 40, you look at that and you go, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. But it doesn't make a ton of sense when you're 18 years old. And just like in the pros, guys come out of high school, keep score. Oh, what'd you get? I got 100,000. Oh, I got 150. Really? Yeah. That's That's the game. And you could say money has ruined the game, and maybe it has. But when you're talking about Philadelphia schools that are not football schools, I mean, look at what's left here. Of the teams that remain in the tournament, there is not one. Maybe Maryland might be the only one where winning the basketball championship is bigger than the football championship, though the money is a whole lot different. Even BYU had a good team this year. Duke is not traditionally a football school, but they do have football. You know, across the board, it's football. Just go down to the left side of the bracket. Auburn, Michigan, Ole Miss, Michigan State, Florida, Maryland, Texas Tech, Arkansas, right side, Duke, Arizona, BYU, Alabama. What says football more than Alabama? Purdue, okay. Purdue has been bad, but at times they've been okay. Kentucky, not necessarily a football school, but they send guys to the pros. And Tennessee, which is a big football school. And you're not seeing St. Joe's. You're not seeing Villanova. You're not seeing Drexel. Now, the Big Five, that's not happening, and the economics are telling you that. And, you know, all credit to Phil Martelli for saying what he's saying, but that's just not reality anymore. And if you're going to participate in this, as Kevin Willard said, the system is broken, but this is the system that we're in, and he's playing the system for all it's worth. He's trying to get more money and get more things that he wants in Maryland. Otherwise, he's going to hightail it to Villanova, or at least they're a basketball school, and maybe he can be the one that breaks them out of this funk of no Philadelphia schools in the NCAA tournament for 3 straight years. Maybe he's the one to do it. But he's also at a school where they don't draw well for football, and I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. They're probably never going to be in a position to compete for a national championship like, you know, the Auburns and the Michigans and Michigan States and Alabama, certainly. You know, they're not in that league. So he's going to be left with what he's left with in basketball, and he may say, okay, I'd rather be the number one basketball team in this school that doesn't really have football. It's got like what we used to call Division I AA or Division FCS or whatever they call it now. So that's the reality. And I like what Phil Martelli is saying. I just wish it were a reality, and it's not reality anymore. So Nationals getting ready to launch. They got an exhibition game this afternoon against the Orioles at Nats Park. It's 1 o'clock. If you're a government employee, apparently you can get in for free. And Barry Zerluga wrote about this in a special section that the Post put out over the weekend. And we know this intuitively, that ever since they won the World Series in 2019, things have fallen dramatically. Some of it may be pandemic-related. We didn't really get the glow of winning in 2019 because the 2020 season opened late, and they only played 65 games. And then the Steven Strasburg disaster, where he was the World Series MVP. They gave him $245 million, and he gave him 33 innings. So that had something to do with it. And then the shipping off of all the great players that they had on that team. Juan Soto's no longer here, and many others. Now, some they made the right call. They Anthony Rendon, not re-signing him was the right move. But the guys that helped them win the World Series, they're gone. And you know that there has been a pretty dramatic drop-off since then. But here's how dramatic it is. Barry looked at the numbers. He talked about the 1913 Philadelphia Athletics. Now, even I'm too young to remember that. But that team had put together what they called the $100,000 infield. That's when $100,000 was a lot of money. Stuffy McGinnis, Eddie Collins, Jack Barry, Home Run Baker. And then eventually they had to sell off all the players, and the team fell apart. Here's what Barry writes about this team. The 2019 Nationals won the World Series. No team in baseball has lost more games since. But more than that, no World Series champion has followed its title with a worse 5-year winning percentage than the Nats at .407 since, you guessed it, the 1914 to 1918 Philadelphia Athletics. That includes the pennant-winning team in 1914, but also the brutal 109 and 117 loss seasons thereafter. Their winning percentage in that span, 38%. Nationals not much better, just over 40%. But for the Nationals, this has been an historic step backward. Even the Florida Marlins, who unexpectedly won the 1997 World Series and then systematically demolished their team, managed a 43% win percentage from 1998 to 2002, and then won the World Series again in 2003. What happened here? Yeah, I mean, the departure of the big stars and the flame out of Strasburg had a lot to do with it. Too many misses in the draft, including first-rounders Mason Denenberg, Seth Romero, and Elijah Green, he says. Mike Rizzo, the GM, understands the Nationals' primary offseason moves, a trade for first baseman Nathaniel Lowe, the signings of pitcher Michael Soraka, Trevor Williams, Jorge Lopez, and Shinigami Ogasawara. I'll learn how to pronounce that, I believe. That's a Japanese pitcher. And the reacquisition of Josh Bell. That's pretty much a yawn. I mean, that's not the Mets paying $756 million for Juan Soto. More from Barry. He says, got the young stars, James Wood in left field, Dylan Cruz in right, C.J. Abrams at shortstop, Keibert Ruiz at catcher, Mackenzie Gore, Jake Irvin, and others. And he goes to the Mike Rizzo theory on this. See if you buy this. Rizzo looks at it this way. Every team in baseball will win 54 games and lose 54. It's what you do in the middle 54 that determines whether you're a playoff team or not. In the 3 years of the wild card playoff format that they have now, the teams with the fewest wins to reach the postseason were the 2023 Arizona Diamondbacks and Miami Marlins, each of whom went 84 and 78. Even that would represent a 13-game improvement for these Nationals, who would go 30 and 24 in Rizzo's theoretical undecided third of the season. So take it for what it's worth. Maybe I'll never get over this because I'm going 34 years without baseball here. I'm still, even this is year 20 since the team moved here. I understand that. But I still am in the thinking that it's really good to have baseball here. Maybe I shouldn't be that way. I should think more about winning. Barry grew up in Boston, so he understands this a little bit better than I do. But I'm not at the point yet where I'm mad. We had a World Series in my lifetime. My father, who lived to be 94, got to see it in his lifetime. So, you know, I take it kind of with a grain of salt, but I understand where he's coming from. All right, coming up in the next hour, much more on the buzzer-beating win for Maryland last night, and also some Chris Webber stories, and one of them's pretty good. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Oh, yeah. You know you want to hear it again.
The Terps are down by 1. And Gillespie looks to inbound. There it goes to Queen. Queen will drive in against Morton. Queen with a shot off the glass. Got it! And the Terps have won it at the buzzer on a shot. Oh, my goodness. By Derik Queen. 72-71. And we're heading to San Francisco. It's about time. Wow. Man, oh, man, oh, man.
Yeah, I don't think you could do any better than the analysis from Chris Nocky and the call from Johnny Holiday last night in Seattle. As Maryland survives and advances, they get by Colorado State. This is what makes March mad, and this is what has made the tournament what it is. Will it be this way going forward? I don't know, but got to say, with what's left here, we got some really good teams. We got mostly chalk. All 4 number 1s are still there. 3 of the 2s, 2 of the 3s, and I guess the Cinderella is Arkansas, and that's not a Cinderella with John Calipari as the coach. 19 years ago, we celebrated George Mason to an extent for the Sweet 16, but much more so as they got to the Final Four. Any of these 16 teams getting to the Final Four is not going to be any kind of a stunner at all because they're all big programs. They got big money behind them. The 14 teams from the SEC, fueled by football money, they send a few shekels the way of basketball, and that's what we got. And the ACC, which really isn't a football conference, they had 4. They got 1 left. It's Duke. Rest of them, SEC, Auburn, Ole Miss, Florida, Arkansas, Alabama, of course. So this is Tennessee. This is what college basketball is these days, for better or for worse. And how they get their arms around this and make it maybe more equitable, we'll see. But can they make it the way it used to be? No, I don't think so. It is what it is. People get used to different things. And we'll just, we just deal with what it is. Now, with that buzzer beater and with the blowout win that they had in the opening game against Grand Canyon, it silences what would be some very loud chattering going on today, and that's the power play that Kevin Willard is in the process of successfully pulling off. He's already chased away Damon Evans, the athletic director. Evans is now at SMU. That was announced over the weekend. And where the contract is going to go, we'll see. I mean, even if they make the Final Four, I don't think it's any guarantee that Willard is back at Maryland next year. I think Villanova may still be in play. And it was only 8 days ago, that the rumors were ramping up, and it was more than rumor. It was being reported that Kevin Willard was on the radar at Villanova. When I first heard, I went, why would he go to Villanova? He's got a good situation here, and he's under contract through 2028. And when he was asked about it on Selection Sunday, after it was announced that his team was going in as a number 4 seed, this is how Willard addressed it.
What I can tell you is Damon Evans and I, he hired me. We're on the same page of what we want to do for this program, what we want to do for this university. His focus and my focus are exactly the same. So our focus right now is strictly the NCAA tournament and this team. But all I can say to that is that me and Damon are on the same page, and we always have.
Well, that was Sunday. 4 days later, the pages apparently changed. This was Willard in his news conference to set up the game that they played on Friday against Grand Canyon, and this doesn't seem to indicate same page anymore.
It is that time of year where
took you guys 3 questions.
I wanted to ask about the basketball too.
Okay.
But obviously your name has come up as a candidate for various positions because Maryland has done so well this year. Have you felt compelled to address any of that with your team at all about your future at Maryland?
Yeah, I've addressed it with them directly. I'll say this. This is Damon and I talked on Sunday night right before Selection Sunday. He gave me a term sheet right before Selection Sunday. I really wasn't focused on it. Been focused on this team and this. Damon's talked to my agent. I talked to Damon this morning at length about where we are. Obviously, it's difficult right now because I think we know his situation. He's probably going to SMU, so it's kind of tough to negotiate with somebody that's maybe not here. But I need to make fundamental changes to the program. That's what I'm focused on right now. That's why probably a deal hasn't got done, because I want to see I need to see fundamental changes done. I want this program to be great. I want it to be the best in the country. I want to win a national championship, but there's things that need to change. When you're at a place for 3 years and you put your heart and soul into it, you kind of sit there and say, okay, wait a second, for us to be really successful, X, Y, and Z needs to change. And first and foremost, I need to make sure that we are where we are with NIL, and rev share is not where we've been with NIL in the past 2 years. We've been one of the worst, if not lowest, in the NIL in the last 2 years. So that's first and foremost. I also have to make a fundamental change where I can do the things that I want to do with my program. I wanted to spend an extra night in New York this year to celebrate Christmas with my team, and I was told that we can't do that because it's too expensive. So I don't know how we can be a top-tier program and I can't spend one extra night in New York because it's too expensive. So there's fundamental things I'm fighting for my team and my program. It's not so much about me. I want to make sure that whatever we do going forward, we're successful, and we're successful at the highest rate. So I'm confident that we'll get things done. It's a little difficult right now, I'm not going to lie. But I'm confident that no matter who we're negotiating with at the end of the day, this program is going to be in a great spot. And that's really my focus, is this tournament, this team, and this program.
Kevin, talking about those fundamental changes, do you feel like Maryland's, the last few years been operating like a basketball school, or do you think it needs to, take the next step in that regard?
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, this is a phenomenal program with an unbelievable history. But like I said, it's simple. When you've been somewhere for 3 years, and I love it here, you're going to find things that need to be changed. And right now, I think I have to take the fact that I think I have an opportunity to make sure that I make fundamental changes to what I believe we need to do to be successful. It's not. Our fan base is unbelievable. Our donors are unbelievable. It's just sometimes you get in when you get into the nuts and bolts of a program, you sit there and say, okay, can we make these changes? And let's make these changes for the best.
So let's realize what he did Thursday. Today's Monday. This is, 5 days ago? One, he basically eliminated any chance that Damon Evans was going to make a U-turn and come back. Oh, no, he's gone to SMU. So I don't know who I'm going to negotiate with, but no more Damon Evans. Then we get to the point where he not only is saying that they need to spend more money, but he airs some incredible dirty laundry here. He's saying that they were too cheap to give him an extra night in a hotel in New York so they could celebrate Christmas. Now, to be fair, he was talking about a game that was played December 21st and wanted to say the 22nd. It wasn't like, hey, we're stuck in New York on Christmas, we don't want to be traveling, whatever it was. No, I mean, that was an extra thing. But the university said, no, well, we don't have the money to do that. So he's got that. And he's also saying, you meet my demands or I'm out the door. All those things are right there, and you don't usually hear that happening. Now, he's cleared a hurdle now, because if they go out to top seed Florida on Thursday night, that's okay. Florida was one of the best teams in the country this year. Most of the preseason polls had them as a good team, and going into the tournament, they had them as one of the favorites. I think that we had Gary on last week, Gary Williams, and he said he thought the two best teams in the tournament are Duke and Florida. I wouldn't be surprised if they meet for the championship in San Antonio on April the 7th. But this is unusual. We don't usually see this, but these are different times in college basketball. So I think it's going to work out one way or another for Kevin Willard. But right now, he doesn't have I think Daryl Pines is the president. I guess he negotiates with him. He doesn't have to deal with Damon Evans, who apparently he didn't want to deal with anymore. He got Damon Evans out the door, and, he's done enough to justify it. If he lost last night, that's the talk. The talk is, all the distraction about the contract, players couldn't concentrate, yada, 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 but he got it done, and he got it done getting the ball to his best player. This was after the game, Kevin Willard on what he did, and I kind of surprised people by saying this about what he did at the end of the game after playing basketball his whole life at some of the highest levels in high school and now a full year in college.
So that was my first game winner, and when Coach drew up the play, my teammates trusted me, and he trusted me. I was a little bit nervous, but I knew we was due for one, and I had to make this.
And if he doesn't make that shot, again, we're talking about Kevin Willard and the contract, and that was early in the news conference. A couple of questions later. Wait a minute, that's your first?
This is your first game winner ever, or
yeah?
I wouldn't have given it to him if I had known that.
Astute decision. Did you come to Maryland to make moments like this, especially in March?
Yes, of course. I mean, first I just want to put on for Baltimore. I mean, a lot of people don't really make it out of Baltimore, and then I just wanted to come here and make a change, and then hopefully I did make a change so Coach Willard can keep getting a lot of local kids.
Well, I don't know if the pipeline had dried up, but Gary broke that in 1993. That's over 30 years ago when he got Keith Booth there. That had been a problem. Ernie Graham had been a great player at Maryland. Still, I think, holds the scoring record for one game, 44 points against NC State, and supposedly went home and said to the people of Baltimore, no, Maryland's not a place you want to be. And then Gary was able to break the ice by getting Booth. And I think they've gotten other players since. But this is a big deal. This is a big deal to get Queen this year. He's one of the top recruits in the country. I don't know what they had to pay him. He was asked about his coach. He said, yeah, he's the one that gives us the money. But he got his guy, and in the biggest moment, he delivered last night. Remember the scene at the end of Hoosiers where they call the timeout, and Gene Hackman says to his group, he says, okay, Jimmy, we're going to use you as a decoy. They're going to expect you to get the ball, and then the players have long faces, and he says, "What's the matter with you guys?" And he says, one of them says, "Well, we want Jimmy to take the shot." And he says, "Okay, draw it up here. Jimmy, take the shot." Jimmy takes a shot. They win the game. That's Hollywood. That's not what happened last night in Seattle.
I asked the guys, I said, who wants the ball? Because sometimes you can draw something up for a guy that maybe doesn't want the basketball. And his exact words, "I want the MF ball." And so once he said that, it was a pretty simple decision. And I could see everyone's body language just kind of perk up a little bit because he was so confident in that fact that he wanted the basketball. So it was just a simple zipper, give him the basketball and let him go to work.
Yeah, Jimmy Chitwood said, "I'll make it." And they made a T-shirt about that. Somebody is making a T-shirt now which says, "I want the MF ball." Got to be a shirt that's they got the Crab 5. I got the hiccups now. I don't know why I have the hiccups, but anyway, that's from last night. One last thing, and this also goes to Willard and the contract. He had a good run at Seton Hall. They were a team that made the tournament on a regular basis, a program that doesn't have as much money as Maryland. And he had never made the Sweet 16 there, and now he's in for the first time in his career.
I know it's always been on my back, and it's always been a stigma. But I had confidence in myself that eventually, if you keep getting to this tournament, which my teams keep getting to this tournament, that I was eventually going to knock the door down. I wish I would have done it at Seton Hall, to be honest with you, first. It was a place I loved and still love, and they were so good to me. I wish I would have been able to do it there, but I'm glad that this is only our second Sweet 16 in 23 years here, so I'm just as happy that it happened at Maryland.
Yeah, and 2016 was the year that they did it under Mark Turgeon. The thing we'll never know, and you wonder about it, because they had a team that was good enough, I think, to get to the Sweet 16 in 2020, but the tournament was knocked out because of COVID. And that's a team that we'll always wonder about, because that was really a good group. They had a great season that year. And without COVID, who knows what would have happened. But here we are 5 years later. Maryland is back in the Sweet 16, and they got a tough road. If they manage to get by Florida, they would play the winner of Arkansas and Texas Tech to get to the Final Four. And that would mean a matchup, if they get there. Auburn's the top seed. They're playing Michigan, and then Ole Miss and Michigan State are matching up. Wouldn't be something? I mean, a lot has to happen, and there are 2 games in between. But wouldn't it be something to see a matchup with Michigan State in the Final Four to get to the national championship game? And with all the tournament strife and drama that they've had against Michigan State, and Gary Williams, when he's in his quiet moments, doesn't necessarily think about winning the NCAA championship in 2002. He thinks about 2010 with one of the favorite players he ever coached, Gravis Vasquez, in his last game, getting beat at the buzzer by Corey Lucius and it was Draymond Green who threw the pass. And he threw the pass past a player who ducked. Corey Lucius caught it, hit it at the buzzer, and Maryland lost in what would have taken them to the Sweet 16. And to this day, Gary will say, he ducked. Who ducks? He ducked. The ball went to Lucius. Lucius hit the 3, and Maryland went home. Boy, a chance to exercise the ghosts if they can get to San Antonio and if they can get through 2 games in San Francisco starting on Thursday night against Florida. Crazy. All right, Bram is coming up next, and I'll be back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.